Welcome to the airwaves of Voice of the Cape 91.3. Ustad Wadud Hassan, we've been talking about him for weeks. Alhamdulillah, finally in South Africa for the mindfulness tour with what is a hope. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Ustad.
Walaikum salam. Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, mashallah. And we also have a beautiful wife, of course, with us, and that is Sister Leah.
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum wa
Welcome,
rahmatullah.
Thank you so much for hosting us today.
Also joined with Sister Nashua and the dearest Auntie Zenat of Warriors of Hope. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very excited to see you.
MashaAllah, she has arrived with the Rahmah. We haven't had rain really in a while, so today we've got lots of
Say
blessings.
not yet.
We're really delighted to have you with us. We've obviously been listening to some of your nasihas over the week, but I think we're going to jump right into it. And so, if Ustad can tell us a little bit about yourself and your own journey to mindfulness.
Yes. Thank you so much. Such a beautiful community here. So happy and honored to meet all of you. And this concept of mindfulness, it seems a little remote, right? It's just one of those things that is so important to us as Muslims, to be present, to be aware, to be God-centered. And how did I start specializing in this? This is an interesting journey where I come from a background in education, a few decades of being an educator, teacher, head of school. And I realized that there was a big gap in the way we're doing tarbiyah for kids. And we were teaching character development and without really focusing and understanding the principles of human transformation, the principles of brain and behavioral development, the principles of the psychology of the child, which is very important to Islamic psychology, the nafs, and like the development of the child, the whole child. So I started thinking that after my graduate studies, I did my principles leadership training at Harvard. I went to Vanderbilt University for my graduate studies in leadership and organizational development. I started doing this program where we had an international team developing a very hands-on project-based way to like make this learning experiential for kids. Like, what does it mean to experience gratitude? Or what does it mean to, work with our fear or our anger or our sadness? And how do we, as Muslims, become emotionally well in a God-centered way? So that was the start of our journey. And 2 years into the journey, doing camps and programs with kids, curriculum, we realized that the people that need it even more are the adults. And because those kids, they did this beautiful project on gratitude, but then if there's nobody to reinforce or model it for them in the classroom or in the homes, it's not really going to stick. So we started developing a course and we wanted to teach them about this prophetic, for Muslims, this prophetic framework of, this intersection between prophetic examples and the evidence-based psychology on how to do tarbiyah of the child. And this led us to this course. We called it, become a character coach. And it starts with a prophetic model of emotional intelligence. As a teacher, how can you regulate and model that sense of awareness and regulation so kids can learn about behavior, emotions, behavioral regulation. And, as in this journey, I was getting certified and trained in different programs. And one program I went through was developed at Google. It's called Search Inside Yourself. And it was to help Googlers, engineers, to become more mindful, more connected to their team, have deeper empathy, compassionate leadership. And it transformed the workforce in a way that it started catching on fire, went to like 50 countries, 150 cities. And, like companies like big software companies like SAP had a chief mindfulness officer. And they found that the employees that trained on this mindfulness and focus and performance and productivity, their productivity went up about 200%. And so this was from an organizational effectiveness perspective. But with my training, after offering it with cities, I've trained like cities and leadership. In my city, I've trained the mayor and the city leadership, interfaith councils, big company, leaders. I realized that what really was my calling was not just in that space of being a leadership, expert or OD developer, but somebody that could really connect it to my faith. Because I grew up with, many beautiful teachers and scholars, and this was my calling. And I felt, let's go back and see, we have so much to offer the world. We're not using these tools, and started then deep diving, with beautiful teachers and their teachings like Imam Ghazali's work, Imam al-Hasidi's work, Ibn Attalah's work, and figuring out how can we bring Imam Suyuti's work, how can we bring these models in a coachable format for Muslims to transform the way they think, or to even understand where do these thoughts come from, how do we reframe those negative, unproductive thoughts and emotions to a productive, healing-centered, abundance-centered way of living in a God-centered way. And that took us a little bit of time to research and develop, and we launched our mindfulness masterclass right around COVID when Sister Z, Auntie Z, joined us for our one of our first masterclass. So we launched the first Muslim, mindfulness masterclass. How can we become more mindful, emotional intelligence? Yes, through learning about science, but more so by understanding a prophetic framework.
So I've heard what I'm hearing also is that is I've heard family, I've heard kids, I've heard corporate, I've heard how this has had a complete marriage to the deen, starting from psychology to your academics to now that. It sounds holistic. And Ustad is of course spending the weekend here. Is the tour meant for everyone that you've just mentioned as well?
Yes, so we try to bring the content in a way that is at the principle of human-centered transformation. What are some principles of transformation when we want to come out of our bad habits or unproductive thoughts, emotions, patterns of behavior and habits that are not really good for ourselves, and we want to build new things. It starts by training your brain with a new practice, and they found that you can actually shift your brain. So they basically did this study, and they put two groups of people under a scanner, basically, this functional MRI scan of the brain. And they didn't tell them that before we do the study, while you're sitting and waiting, your brain is already being measured. And they found that people that practice like, daily meditation or mindfulness versus people that have never done any of that, and how their brains are functioning when they're just sitting around waiting. And they found that people that practice mindfulness on a regular basis, practice meditation on a regular basis, their center of the brain that is responsible for mind wandering, called the DMN network, default mode network, was a lot more active, meaning they're all over the place. They're not really present. Versus those that practice on a regular basis. And what neuroscience in the last few decades have shown us is that this concept of neuroplasticity, that our brains don't stop developing even as adults. We can change not just the functionality of the brain to be more focused, more present, more grateful. We can literally change the structure of the brain. If you practice something consistently, and this is where the beautiful hadith of the Prophet comes in, that the most beloved to Allah are the actions that are small but consistent. Small, 10, 15, 20 minutes, but consistent. It can rewire your brain, new neural pathways in your brain. So what a beautiful way to have this building of human potential, but from a prophetic framework. It's not just the brain, but it's also the heart. It's also the soul. It goes so much deeper than that.
So I know when I first heard about this, Ustad, my first thing was like, what is this mindfulness all about? Because it sounds like a simple word, but it's not really.
Mystical. It sounds almost like this.
Yeah.
Mindfulness seems like this mystical, like what is this?
Intellectual
Is it a Buddhist? Like what is this meditation? It seems very archaic, very, very foreign,
Yeah.
And we thought about like, should we use other words? But I talked to scholars and teachers, and I talked about what we're doing and the importance of teaching Muslims about mindfulness and emotional intelligence and meditation and contemplation. And we said, no, we're going to use the words that are mainstream, and just like non-Muslims don't have the word God. We can use the word God. We can use the word divine. We can use the word messenger or the prophet. Same way, no one has a monopoly on the word meditation or mindfulness. We Muslims know it from our tradition that the prophet or all prophets had to go into deep practice of mindfulness when they wanted to find their way. When they felt like we're lost, the society in general is lost. And what this young boy Ibrahim alayhi salam goes out and he meditates for we don't know how many hours or days, and he says, oh, is it the sun or is it the moon or who is the God? Until he said, Inni wajjahtu wajhiya lilladhi fatara as-samawati wal arda hanifa. He then found his way, he found his direction. after he meditated, contemplated. The Prophet ﷺ had to withdraw himself from the society, go into the cave, get into the state of meditation until he could really, zone out, tune out the noise and distraction, and find that voice and find that connection with God. And this is so important that even though we might not have to be able to, in this modern context of life, go into a cave, there might be practices or tools that, both science backed, but also a prophetic that can really help us cultivate our best.
Well, we are, of course, with Ustad Wadud Hassan, all the way from Texas down in South Africa for a weekend of works that is the 16th, 17th, and 18th of February. On Friday, it's at Hosea Menzies, Saturday and Sunday. Saturday, all-day workshop at the Islamia Auditorium, starting at 9, ending at 5. On Sunday, from 9 all the way until forward. We're going to go in for a quick ad break and we'll be back soon. Okay, so Auntie Abida is getting us over there. But for now, we're going in for an ad break. Okay, Auntie Abida is saying I must continue. Okay, but should I? Okay. Hey, so it's a bit different today because we got a special guest. Alhamdulillah. So we were just talking about mindfulness. Now, we've also got Ustad's beautiful wife with us, and I'm just wanting to ask because even though as a married couple, sometimes we share and support each other in our interests. What was it like when Ustad had gotten involved in this particular concept for yourself? And your development in the mindfulness concept that Ustad is, of course, giving to the community, giving to our youth, giving to so many to enable more mindfulness.
Right. No, that's a great question. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. So, we always joke with Liz and I when we talked about it years ago when he began his research in this field of work. I was a little bit skeptical about, just like you asked, like, what is mindfulness and is it a foreign concept? But really, as I started, I was a mother, I was a working woman, and a lot of times you might hear the concept of being on autopilot, where you're just going from one task to another. I'm thinking a lot of moms can relate to this, where you wake up in the morning and all of your mental workload gets started, right? Of like what you need to do for yourself, for the kids, for the home, for your husband, and it just keeps going, right? You're on autopilot, doing, where you don't stop for a minute to reflect, to breathe, to think that what am I really doing with my life, right? And there was a time where I was in a very stressful job, and I often found myself manifesting that tension, that stress in other parts of my life, whether home, with my dealings with my children, where I didn't want to be that way, right? And I found a lot of the tools that he'll talk about on the workshop on Saturday, inshallah, they're practical, simple tools, things that I was trying to do, like breathing techniques and other techniques that even on my commute back from work to home, where I could really bring myself to a calm, more present moment so I can be a better version of myself with my family.
Subhanallah. And now we are genuinely taking a break, or what is happening at Africa? Because it's 11. Well, on that note, we would like everyone to obviously get together. We're going to continue with shift just after, with Ustad just after this. And when we do, we'll also be sharing the details of how you can join the workshops of this weekend, inshallah.
There's something special.
Okay.
But I think you're fine.
Okay.
We're just legit vibes, so.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. We are post with Ustad Wadud Hassan, all the way from Dallas, Texas. We have been visiting South Africa. Has a workshop happening this weekend. I know that we're getting messages wanting to know more details about the actual event. We're going to just deal a word with Sister Zina Carter. She is the head of Warriors of Hope. And when you listen to that title, Warriors of Hope, they have been doing amazing, amazing work in the community. And
Walaikum salam.
always wonderful to have Jennifer in studio with us. But now, of course, Warriors of Hope has decided to host this workshop this weekend. It is a workshop not only to empower the community, but also to raise the necessary funds for the immense work that Warriors of Hope does. Tell us a little bit about
Okay, absolutely. You know, when I enrolled for the first class, as Ustad was saying, my thought immediately was, I want this to come to every person in Cape Town.
how long ago was that?
That was at the start of COVID. And that was a thought. And it just shows how Allah responds to a thought that we have. And today I've got Ustad, mashallah, staying with us. So we're seeing mindfulness in action. Alhamdulillah. And Warriors of Hope, yes, I've been under the radar. We've been doing a lot of things. And for 10 years, when I think about where and how Allah has exposed us to the spaces that we've been in, I needed to make sure that we uplift ourselves as individuals in order to do the work. And with that comes a lot of commitment. And as you know, we cannot run our organization without funds. And alhamdulillah, up until now, we've been able to do that. But we have this, and we will be talking a little bit more tomorrow evening about the vision for Warriors of Hope and over the weekend. But we have a huge plan to upskill people to do chaplaincy work.
So just on that note, you're one of the chaplains on
Yes.
the South Hospital. And just for those that are tuned in right now, the type of work, I mean, over the years that I've had you in studio with me, we've connected and heartfelt interviews where you've spoken to us about bereaved families, those that have really suffered loss, painful experiences. And so I'm wanting to ask you, since doing the mindfulness workshop with Ustad that many years ago, have you incorporated it into the activities that Warriors of Hope does?
Definitely. So when I am asked to engage with families, I sort of ground them. I take the tools that Ustad has taught us, and I say to them, do the deep breaths, the things that Ustad will be sharing over the weekend. And you can see that people are still hyperventilating.
Now, I went home last night, and this morning I'm telling them at work is the three dates that you got to do. And I'm like, the first one is, wait, I know this one that you connected to prophetic God. And there's something about the aches and stuff in my body. So I know that this is going to be an amazing weekend. Like, you know, I was telling my mom, the Saturday one starts at 9, it finishes at 5. And mashallah, she's almost 80, but she was saying, like, you know what, I think it's long, but I'm like, mommy, I don't think you can feel those hours.
No.
So Ustad, we're yearning, but they are tools to be achieved this weekend. Earlier on, you spoke to us. You spoke about the youth. You spoke about companies that have benefited from them. Workshops that are happening this weekend. Can you tell us about that and what our focal points be and what those attending will be taking home with them?
Yeah. So I will start a little bit about why we're training on this mindfulness and emotional intelligence, emotional wellness, because this is such an important tool to learn to take care of ourselves. And this question I normally ask is that can you be spiritually well without being emotionally well? Can you reach your spiritual potential as a Muslim without working on your emotional potential? If you get carried away, if you snap, if you react continuously, if you don't know how the way that you act impacts other people, you don't know how to work on some of the difficulties you feel inside of yourself, how are you going to really cultivate your best self as a Muslim? How are you going to cultivate taqwa or beautiful character or akhlaq? You're not really going to be able to do that. This is why the tools are so important. You know, a lot of times we say, let's be patient, but how? How do you be patient? What are the steps of being patient? What happens to our brain when we are not being patient? How can we go from that to a state that we can be patient? So to understand that psychology is something that our teachers and our scholars have written 1,000 years ago in their books. Like you cannot imagine the length that our teachers and our scholars have written about, you know, in terms of how to manage these emotions and how to be aware of it, how to regulate it. Suyuti has this entire model of where thoughts come from. You know, fleeting thoughts to, you know, this thoughts settling into yourself, having a conversation with your thought, and turning your maybe unproductive thoughts or emotions into intentional actions and behavior. And how do you start at the thought level? And these are things that we're now researching in neuroscience in the last 2 decades. And our teachers and scholars have written about it like hundreds of years ago. So we have such a beautiful tradition of this Islamic psychology. And Islamic psychology is all about understanding the development of the self and how do you take it from the lower self, nafsul amara bisu, that takes us away from our best self, to nafsul lawama that starts becoming aware, starts becoming mindful, starts taking account of itself to build itself up to the point of nafsul mutmainna, so that we are completely content with God. We're in a state of, you know, remembrance, a state of mindfulness, state of contentment. And this takes tools to build. And where do we build it? How do we build it from? The first step is mindfulness. Why? Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, ittaqullah wa qulu qawlan sadida. Be mindful of God and then speak what is the plain and clean, you know, simple truth. Speak the plain truth, right? But the scholars, they say that why didn't Allah just say, Allah has told us like be mindful of God a lot of other places. Why didn't he just get to like Kulu, Qawla, and say to speak the truth? Why did he say mindful of God, be mindful of God first? Because our teachers and our scholars explain to us that without that awareness in ourselves, we're not going to be able to really be truthful. Because we're not being true to ourselves. We're not being true to God when we're distracted. So it is so important to learn the tools that we're going to be talking about. You know, we're going to talk a little bit about science, of how it works. I'll give you a quick point of science. Dr. Harvard Benson in the 80s, he was in charge of the hypertension division at the Harvard Medical School. And he found through his studies is that 4 things really help patients overcome their stress and their hypertension. What are those 4 things? The first thing he says is to sit at a, you know, environment where you're free of distraction and a calm, relaxed environment. Number 1. Number 2 is consciously relaxing your body's muscles, because the science found, you know, in the last 2 or 3 decades that the emotions first and foremost show up in our body, in our muscles, before they become, you know, they impact our mind and our psychology. It comes in our physiology. So how to let go of the emotions by relaxing all the muscles of the body consciously. Number 2. Number 3, from his research, he found out that if we can help them focus or meditate on something that helps them feel better for 15 to 20 minutes. It could be the breath. It could be a beautiful visualization. It could be a touch or feel, you know, or a sensory device. Sometimes for kids, maybe it's a blanket or a toy or a teddy bear, right? So it could be something that helps them calm their mind and just focus on that for a moment. It could be a smell. And you do it for 15 to 20 minutes. And the 4th thing he said was all the other thoughts and distractions that's going to come during that time, having an attitude of non-judgment, just this kind of like objective attitude, not get hooked to those thoughts and emotions. Just let them pass. Don't get too involved and carried away by them. If you can do these four things, he said that he could see the results in the patients, that they were able to see the benefit of calming themselves and calming their nerves, relaxing their muscle, relaxing, and even bringing down to the point that they're bringing their blood pressure down. Later on, he publishes another work and he says he found a fifth thing, which is prayer. If you add prayer to that, it can create a deeper environment in the patients to find and maximize that exercise. Right? So we already have this in our tradition, right? People come to me and say, okay, what is mindfulness? Is it like just salah? I said salah can be, and salah is and should be, but then our salah is so, at a ritualistic level, just checking, like do's and don'ts, and it's almost at a transactional level that I do salah and Allah give me Jannah. It's a transactional level. How do we take salah from transactional to transformational? And to make it transformational, we have to become aware and present.
I just wanted to ask Ustad. So I know it sounds like a lot of self work, but there's a little voice in all of our heads, and that is that little voice
Right.
that says, "You are gone, Christina. You are gone." But half the time they're taking over and making us go crazy and believing every thought. So we find ourselves in a number of situations in one day where we would be building the day on emotions that we assume is happening around us.
Mhm.
So what would Ustad's comment be on that?
Yes, this is a really good question because we have to most of the time let those thoughts pass, and such as that we do like an exercise like a mindfulness practice called open awareness, how to name the thoughts and
20.
2014.
They don't do 20.
Oh yeah, it's 11:14. Yeah.
We're not like quarter past or 22.
Oh, is
Uh,
it?
We just say the
Are you
literal.
getting lost in that?
I'm calculating in my mind.
Okay. 20 minutes to the hour. Also,
Abel, you're able to get your photo with us.
certainly,
And what is
we've got
that?
5 tickets to give away. 5 double tickets that we need to give away for the Football for Humanity, Palestine versus Bafana Bafana on Sunday. We've got 5 to give away. And just mention it, the first 5 names we'll take it out.
You can give 2 tickets for them. We'll give it.
No, you can give it, I'll add it to the giveaway list.
No, it's good. We'll give it. We'll get it. Yes.
Raffles.
And it is really finding yourself, loving yourself, finding your purpose. And it's of course hosted by Warriors of Code. And you are of course right now wanting to know how to get your hands on some tickets and how much it is going to cost.
Okay. So the tickets, if I can just come in here quickly, the one thing that I very quickly learned through the mindfulness class was how to get out of scarcity thinking. Because we all, the first thought that we have, oh, but I don't have money. And the minute you have that thought, automatically you are limiting yourself and you won't have the money. But if you make the intention that I want to get there, Allah will make sure that you are there. So the tickets for Saturday is 650, and for Sunday it is 300. Actually 600 for Saturday and 300 for Sunday. But I have to tell you that you are in for a treat, because we've just printed the books that you will be getting, and it is a whole lot more Ustad than what we got in our masterclass. So I will have to tell our cohorts that Cape Town has really gotten the best. Ustad is not holding back. He is giving a whole lot more than what it is costing. So 600 for Saturday and 300 for Sunday. And Ustad will teach you how to get out of scarcity thinking into abundant thinking. So please do join us.
So what is that number?
082
Okay.
82 48 797.
Once again, I could just repeat that number.
082 82 48 797.
Okay, if you hadn't gotten it yet, I will share it with you. Just message us on the WhatsApp line. It's been absolutely amazing having you all in studio with us. Shukran so much, Ustad Wadud, as well as our Ustad Leah and Dinat Abba, Nazir Bai, and of course we have Sister Nashua that hasn't said a word, but it's really been awesome having you all in studio with us. We look forward to everyone benefiting this weekend, inshallah. Inshallah. Shukran so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.